In the previous lecture, we saw the buyer's profile for the three different options. We looked at the March series, and we looked at three different options. We looked at the 425 call, which was an in the money option. Then we looked at the 470 call, which was an at the money option. And we looked at the 510 call, which was an out of the money option. But we looked at it from a buyer standpoint. So, the risk graphs that we plotted there were all that of a buyer. The buyer has unlimited profits on the upside and has limited losses on the downside. And the losses are limited to the premium that he pays. Now, in this lecture, we want to take a look at what the seller's profile looks like, because the seller's profile is going to be exactly the opposite of the buyer's profile. So I'm going to start with the 470 call, which is the at the money option. We select the 470 call. We are going to pay, if we were the buyer, we were going to pay $15.45. Now, in this case, we are not going to be the buyer. We're going to simulate the position of a seller. So if we look at the risk graph, this is that of a buyer. And if we wanted to plot the risk graph of that of the seller, then on the platform, it's very easy. Instead of buy, all you do is you say sell. And you can see that the risk graph immediately changes, and it's really a symmetrical version of the buyer. So if you recall here on the buyer had limited losses until here. So the seller has limited profits until the same point. And then the buyer has unlimited profits on the upside, and therefore the seller will have unlimited losses on the same side. So if Apple continues to go up, the seller is going to see unlimited losses. So think about the $1 million option. And we also considered a scenario that in 60 days that the price of this house went up to $1.1 million. And what happened in that case? The buyer, we were the buyer, and our cost basis was $1,025,000, and so we were able to pocket the $75,000 in profit. And that $75,000 really came from the seller, because the seller lost that amount in that 60 days. Because if he hadn't gotten into that option contract, he could have realized that $75,000. Similarly, if in our case, if we bought this option, and let's say Apple went from 467 to 530, we are looking at a profit of about $45,000 here. Now that is going to come out from the seller. So if we looked at the seller's profile, and if it went up to 530, you can see that the seller's facing a loss of about $40,000 to $45,000 in this range. And that has to be because there's only two parties to this contract. There is a buyer and there's a seller, and the risks and the rewards are shared between them. It's not an equal sharing by any means. The seller obviously has a lot more risk in this transaction. So the seller has unlimited risk if Apple continues to go up, but they only have limited profits if Apple stays at 470 or below 470. So again, you might be thinking, why on earth would I be a seller? And I'm afraid you'll have to hold that thought for a couple of more courses, because that's a very deep question, and you're going to have to learn all the mechanics of options. But like I said before, all insurance companies or big companies, they operate on this model. So it is a very viable model. I also want to mention one more thing here. I don't want you to get concerned with this unlimited loss profile. It's because we are studying a single option here. This part of the profile looks very scary. But once you come to the spreads level, it's very easy to limit this loss. So, for example, I'm just going to show it to you so that you understand what is possible when you're selling options. I'm going to add another simulated trade, and I'm going to basically put the add another trade onto it. So this is called a spread. So when you do a spread, you're doing more than one option at one time. But if you do a spread, see what happens to the risk profile. Okay, so here the risk profile now becomes limited for the seller. So he's still a seller, his profits are limited, but his losses are also limited. So that's the beauty of spreads. But spreads is a much more advanced topic. It's going to take you a few more courses and perhaps a few months of practicing the single options before you can get to that spreads level. But I wanted to show you that you don't have to worry about this unlimited loss profile. It sounds scary, but you never sell naked options. And what we mean by naked options is if you don't have this option there, this is a naked sell. And you never sell naked sells. In fact, many brokers don't even allow you to put on a naked sell because of this unlimited loss. So if you do become a seller of options, you're probably looking at selling a spread rather than a single option. So there's nothing to be concerned about this. Selling options is a very, very viable strategy, but you'll have to get there in stages. And the first step is to master buying options, and then you look at the Greeks, and there's a plenty of stuff between single options and spreads. So we'll have to get to that in stages. But this is what we looked at for the 470 call. I'm going to quickly show you what the 425 call looks like. So the 425 call is obviously here. The seller gets premium. They make a maximum profit if Apple stays below 425. And they will make some profit between 425 and this current price. But if Apple continues to go up, the seller sees unlimited losses again. Similarly, but the numbers are much larger here. I mean, that's the whole point. Because the seller is getting $45,800, you can see that their maximum profit is $45,800. But in this case, the seller has very little room, because if Apple goes from 467 to 471, you can see that the seller is going to start accumulating losses. And that's exactly because when we looked at the buyer's profile, that's what we saw. Now, the buyer needed the move to be only so much between 467 and 471. So when you look at the seller, it's going to be exactly the opposite. The seller has very little room for error. And if Apple goes beyond that, he's going to start seeing losses right away. And that's the problem with in-the-money options. But he is capturing $45.80 per share in premium right now. So when somebody sells an option, they get this amount into their account right away. And that's how the seller also benefits from selling options. So that's as far as the three different options are concerned. We've done a pretty detailed job of analyzing them on the risk graph. And we've also done a pretty detailed job of understanding their characteristics in terms of what expiry series you choose, what strike prices you choose, and the choice of in the money, at the money, or out of the money will impact the cost of your option purchase, the cost of your call option. It will also impact the probability of success on your options. But as a call option buyer, you have unlimited profits on the upside and you have limited losses on the downside. As a call option seller, you have exactly the opposite characteristics. So we've reached the end of the course on call options. In the next course, we're going to cover put options. So call options was an important course because it is the foundation of all of options trading. It's better to start with call options, and then in the next course now, we are going to study put options. But please do bear in mind the examples that we've covered in this course, because we might refer to these examples even in the put options course. So thank you for watching this course. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, please send me an email at info@optiontiger.com. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.